But this dream was powerful. In this dream, I was standing at the threshold of a narrow door. When I woke up, I told my friend David the dream. And he said, Nabil, this dream is so clear. Just go to Luke chapter 13.
Nabil, an ex-Muslim, shares why Christianity is true, and we can have a firm foundation to know that Christianity is the correct religion. So make sure to watch till the end because I have a Bible verse that will tie all of this together. Let's get into it.
Islam very clearly denies some things about Jesus. Yes, Jesus is miracle working, he's the Messiah, but it denies that he ever died on the cross. It denies that he ever claimed to be God. And if he never died on the cross, how did he rise from the dead? So Islam denies the death, deity, and resurrection of Jesus. Well, according to Paul, what do you need to believe in order to be saved? If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, so the deity, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. The very three things Islam denies, you have to believe in order to be saved. And so for me, it was a matter of trying to prove that those things didn't happen in order to establish the case for Islam. Well, as I was trying to disprove those things, I realized the evidence for Jesus' death, deity, and resurrection was very strong.
So that must have been difficult for you again in your devout faith at the time, and all of a sudden some restlessness began?
It wasn't overnight. It took years for me to see this evidence and for it to compile and for the tectonic shifts to happen in my mind. And when I realized the evidence was strong, then I turned my eyes to Islam and I said, how strong is the evidence for Islam? And to my shock, it was far weaker. When I leveled the same criticisms I had leveled on Christianity on Islam, the foundation fell apart. And so that's when it became a matter between me and God of actually asking him to show me the truth.
So how did you actually come to Christ? Dreams were a fundamental part of what God used, and that's even, as Muslims grow up, they take dreams very seriously. Tell our viewers about that. That's fascinating, exciting.
Well, for Muslims, most Muslims don't believe they can commune with God. Some modern Muslims do, and some Sufi Muslims do, but generally in history and the way that Islam has traditionally been taught, is God is kind of removed from you. And the only way you can really get guidance directly from him is through dreams. And Muslims have a prayer, it's called Salat Istikhara, where they specifically ask God to give them dreams for guidance.
Wow.
And so I ask God for visions and for dreams, and I'm not alone in that. Approximately 50 to 70% of former Muslims who are now Christians came partially through visions and dreams.
Wow, that's awesome. And you had one very specific dream. Tell us that.
When you truly seek God, you will find him. And some Muslims definitely are seeking God. They're trying to know the one true God. And I think that's why God reveals himself. Jesus reveals himself to them. And that's why they get saved. And I can't wait to get into this about Nabil. And it's just so sad that he passed away because, man, I know he's still making a massive difference in so many people's lives, but imagine if he was still alive and doing so many amazing things for God's kingdom.
Dream was the one that convinced me. I had one that was very symbolic, and then I had a follow-up dream, and I also had a vision, but this dream was powerful. In this dream, I was standing at the threshold of a narrow door. This door was just wide enough to fit me and just tall enough to fit me. I mean, in my dream, it was like, wow, this door is narrow. And at the other side of this doorway was a room that was set with a feast. And people were sitting down in nice clothes at these round tables, and it was like a wedding feast. And I knew in my dream that that room was heaven. I wanted to get into that room, but I couldn't because at the other end of the doorway was my friend David. Now, he wasn't blocking me per se, he was looking forward. In fact, all the people in the room were looking forward, waiting for the owner or the speaker to come and start the event. But I couldn't get in because he was blocking the way, and so I looked at him and I said, David, I thought we were going to eat together. And he says, you haven't responded. And in the dream, right there, I knew I needed to respond to the invitation David was giving me in order to come into heaven. But this is where it got crazy. When I woke up, I told my friend David the dream, and he said, Nabil, this dream is so clear. Just go to Luke chapter 13. And I went to Luke 13 for the first time. I had never been to Luke 13 before. And when I opened it up, there was a section there that was titled, The Narrow Door. And when I saw it, my heart just stopped.
Wow. That's so amazing that David Wood was Nabil's friend. And if you guys don't know, David Wood, he's very popular now, debater of Islam and atheistic worldviews. He debates that. And he just debated Alex O'Connor. I'm waiting for that video to drop because that's so amazing and crazy and awesome. And it's wild to see and super fun the fact that he would use David Wood, who once was an atheist and a psychopath and almost killed his father, to help Nabil become a Christian. God reveals himself to people in dreams.
That it did, yeah.
And I'm going to paraphrase it. Basically what it says is Jesus was going through the towns and villages preaching the good news. And the disciples said, Lord, are many going to be saved? And he said, make every effort to enter through that narrow door, because many will try and few will be able. And you will see people sitting inside at the feast of the kingdom of heaven. Make every effort to enter before the owner comes and closes that door. And so I knew that God had given me a dream straight out of the Bible, and he placed me inside a parable, showed me exactly where I was, and he left my decision up to me. Wow. It was very clear for me at that point what I needed to do.
So then what did happen from that point? Because again, your story is amazing in the sense that it wasn't just necessarily that day, but it took a while for you to actually give your life to Christ.
You know, Robbie, in order for a Muslim to become a Christian, they have to be willing to give up a lot. Depending on how devout their family is, their identity is usually wound up in Islam. So it wasn't just me saying, I'm going to change my beliefs.
That's right.
It's me saying, I'm going to leave my family and everything they've stood for, all the way back to Muhammad's time. I mean, my last name's Qurayshi. If Muhammad had a last name, it would have been Qurayshi. He was part of the Quraysh tribe. And so I had to give up everything. My mother was the daughter of a Muslim missionary, so I had to give up all that. I'm the eldest son in my family. I'm the one who's supposed to bring honor to the family. If I become Christian, that's the worst thing I could possibly do.
Wow.
And so I have to think, not only am I giving up my family, I'm consigning my family's reputation to the flames, basically. And so it was something that I needed a lot of time to wrestle through and to pray through, and I asked God to comfort me through it. And it was when I read his word that I received the promises of God, Mark 10:29.
Yes.
And also the encouragement from God to go ahead and make.
And you went through a whole time of mourning in this too. And I remember you came to Matthew chapter 5 in the Beatitudes, and blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted.
Beautiful.
And so that was one of the turning points as well,
I can't tell you how beautiful that message was. You know, in the Quran, there's nothing that says I'm giving you comfort if you're hurting. The Quran says, do this, do that, do this, do that. But there in the Bible, blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted.
Wow.
It was like my heart was just electrified into life when I read that, and my life has never been the same.
You grew up in a devout Muslim and very loving American home. Tell us about that.
I can't imagine having to give up your entire family to become a Christian. I can't imagine being willing to be looked down upon, be apostate, to be frowned upon your entire life, just to be a Christian, to follow the one true Jesus. And he did that because he knew that following Jesus is the most important thing.
My parents are from Pakistan. I was born and raised in the States. And being that they're from Pakistan, it was their desire to raise a devout Muslim child here in the States. So growing up, I learned how to pray the 5 daily prayers, prayed them regularly. By the age of 5, I had memorized the last 7 chapters of the Quran and recited those regularly in my 5 daily prayers. And I actually finished the entire Quran recitation in Arabic by the age of 5. So it was a very devout Muslim life. But my parents also came with some presuppositions about the West. They see the immorality, they see the way people commit adultery, and they see things on TV and the immodest dress, and they impute all of that to Christianity because they see the West as a Christian area. So not only was it me practicing Islam, but they had also kind of taught me to defend myself against Christianity. And that's a common thing for Muslims around the world to come to the West with. And so growing up then, I was a devout Muslim, yes, but I was also trained with arguments to challenge and respond to the gospel.
How did that affect your childhood then growing up compared to like other American kids? And you've kind of spoken that a little bit, but just flesh that out a little bit more.
Well, you know, what I really noticed was for us, Islam was our identity. Like, we knew Islam, we were Muslim, and that's what we were representing wherever we went. My parents really had no choice. My mother, she would wear the burqa, so obviously whenever someone saw her, immediately they're thinking Islam. And I realized that the other kids didn't really own their faith. Yeah, they might call themselves Christian, yeah, they might go to church, but that didn't affect the way they lived. It didn't affect the way they thought. And so that was something that made us even more proud. As Muslims, we thought, we are following the true God. He affects and permeates every aspect of our lives. Whereas in the West, people realize their faith is false, and that's why it doesn't really affect the way they live. That's kind of how we subconsciously thought.
So then for your whole childhood, this is how you were brought up, this is your thinking, these were your convictions. Again, this was your identity, which really stuck with me as well. But there was one particular friendship that you developed, and maybe you can tell us what age that was and how that over time started to introduce you to Christianity.
Absolutely. It was something I did regularly was I would challenge people on the gospel. friends would say to me, Nabil, do you know Jesus? And of course, Muslims have a very developed view of Jesus. They believe he's the Messiah. They believe that he's a miracle-working man. He's sinless. Muslims believe Jesus is going to come back at the end of times. And so I would have a script ready to give, and I would challenge people on their view of Jesus.
And by the way, how did Christians generally do when you did challenge them on their faith?
Miserably. What I realized
suspected.
very early on was that even the slightest challenge on the Bible, on the reliability or the compilation of the Bible, or on Jesus' deity, or on the Trinity especially, no one really knew more than just enough to say what they were told to say. They didn't really know why they believed what they believed, didn't know how to defend it. And so as part of me honoring Islam, I would challenge Christians. Because you see, Muslims see the Trinity as polytheism, and that's offensive to Muslims. And so in so challenging one specific Christian for
I mean, that's so crazy because we see it as monotheism, and it's like almost how we see Mormonism, as because they actually do believe it's three separate beings, and we don't. One God, three essences, different. One being.
first time, and this is when I was a freshman in college, for the first time someone was able to actually respond to my challenge. And I realized this guy not only knows some information about his faith, but he actually cares about his faith. And so we developed this friendship that resulted from me challenging him on the Bible. And that's how I began to get introduced to the power and truth of the gospel.
His name was David, is that right? And I love about in your book how you talk about David was loving to you, patient with you, became a friend to you, which meant so much to you. It wasn't just this all just about this one conversation. There was more of the heart of Christ behind that. Maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I really do think that, I believe what Jesus says. Jesus says that unless you're willing to pick up your cross and follow me, you are not worthy of me. So the gospel is not just, hey, do you want to be saved? Hey, do you want to live a better life? It's, are you ready to die for the sake of this message? And that's something that requires someone to lay down their life. Now, if I'm telling someone, hey, lay down your life, but they don't know they can trust me, why would they ever listen to me? You need to have a relationship with someone when you're sharing the gospel with them, if they're going to hear it. Now, of course, I'm not saying that street preaching doesn't work. I've preached on the side of the street too, and that does work at times, but by far and away, the most powerful way to share the gospel is through relationships.
Right.
Amen.
So through this friendship and relationship with this man, David, you were driven to a point of really just a decision between Islam and Christianity.
Well, for me, it's a matter of sharing the truth and beauty and transformative power of the gospel. I mean, this message changes everything. If God came into this world to take our sins, that means He loves us. It loves us even though we sin against Him. And then He takes a look at us. While He's on the cross, bleeding and dying for us, the words we should remember are, as I have loved you, so love one another. That's the call we're given as Christians. He's given us everything we need in this life and this afterlife, so all we have to do is follow Him and pour ourselves out for the sake of those around us. And that transformative life is the message of the gospel. There's nothing like it.
Amen.
Yeah, amen. And shout out to David Wood, becoming a friend, becoming someone who's... I heard a funny story about David Wood. You know how he's always debating Muslims, and he's kind of harsh. He's kind of direct. And someone emailed him and said, you should be more like Nabil's friend. And he wrote back and said, that was me in the book. I am Nabil's friend. And I thought that was just absolutely hilarious. So good. John chapter 10, verse 29 through 30 says, for my Father has given them to me, and He is more powerful than anyone else. No one can snatch them from the Father's hand. The Father and I are one. Once again, the people picked up stones to kill Him. I wonder why. Because He claimed to be God. He said He and the Father are one. So go to Jesus today. Know that He loves you. He's longing to have a relationship with you. Put Him first above all else. It'll be the best decision you guys could ever make.